Good afternoon, Plymouth. If you can hear us, we just gone live on our P Town um, program. For those who are listening, please do let us know if we are all on and kicking on well. Just bring the screen up quite bigger. Are we on? Anyone can hear us? Just checking our sound. Sound all good?
Yeah, you can hear you.
Fantastic. Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Plymouth. Good afternoon. Streaming from P Town Radio. Cool.
Great. I can see New Dice is live.
Yep, girl out as well.
Brilliant. Good afternoon, guys. Good afternoon for those listening to us. This is our third edition, the third episode out of the 10 we promised to going to be giving out. It's Tuesday, the 28th of May. And we are in house in P-Town Radio having this amazing conversation with amazing people, with amazing vibe. My name is Jabo Butera. And today in the studio, I'm with, starting with you, Stu. Stu Watson is on the way. You want to introduce yourself? Just your name.
Thank you, Jab. I'm Stu Watson, and I'm one of the co-founders of New Dice CIC. We support neurodivergent entrepreneurs.
Fantastic. And we have Mimi in the house.
Yeah, Mimi Jones. I'm founder of Career Out Loud, which is based in the Southwest, and I also support New Dice every so often with my wonderful presence.
Fantastic. So I'm Jabo Butera from Diversity Business Incubator. And the conversation we say we're going to be bringing to you is there in the title. Language matters. Because here we are trying to find the language. And we said it last time, there's no wrong or right. We're going to repeat that. We're going to come back on it. But it's all to do when we come about the diversity. There is a lot of challenges or a lot of situations people are tripping on. They're either fearing or they don't say what it is or they say the wrong. They don't know what is wrong, what is right. And we thought we'll come up here to spend like 45 minutes having this open conversation. And this gives me an opportunity to introduce our disclaimer that here we're speaking is from our lived experience. I'm speaking from my lived experience. I'm an individual coming from the Black community, and I know what it is to be discriminated. And I've seen it, and I've seen how it works. So I'm talking from that perspective. So are my colleagues here. So the views and the opinions presented in this show, they are our personal views and do not reflect the views and opinions of P-Town Radio. In other terms, if you find the word or the views I'm expressing are offensive or encouraging, whatever the direction it is, these are my personal. So is Stu, so is Mimi when they speak. Don't come after P-Town Radio saying we're going to sue the radio station. That's all we're saying. I think that's the disclaimer. And the second disclaimer thing is that we're talking about being courteous, being kind. Mimi, you presented it well last time when you're talking about the way.
Yeah, so we're talking about our experiences. We're talking about being marginalized, finding the right language. I'm going to be using the word queer a lot, for example. A lot of the language that we might be using could come across or could be triggering for some people. That is not our intention. We're just trying to have an open conversation about language, about the way that it's used, about diversity. And when talking about your personal experience from a marginalized person as well, you're going to be saying things that might be triggering, that might have been traumatizing, might have been an instance that someone was using hurtful language for the point of being hurtful. Listen with caution, I suppose. If anything is ever triggering for you, you are more than welcome to turn off the live. We do not want to upset anyone or get anyone into a poor emotional state.
Thank you very much for that, Mimi. And for those who want to make a comments, those who want to reach out to us, as I say, we are on our platforms. All our social media are blasting, and the sound is all on. I can see we are all live and going well. If you have any question, please drop us a text from any Facebook page or any other Instagram or LinkedIn or Twitter. We're all on those platforms, including the P-Town Radio. Please drop us a text, give us your comment, give us your suggestion, and we'll express it here. We'll share with everyone. It's because what it is about sharing this good practice. I'll come to you first, Stu. When we're talking about the language, and it says the right language, But you picked that already, and saying when we are presenting ourselves as the one with the right language, are we saying we're the only one who's right? Do you want to develop on that?
Yes. So I think often my brain is running ahead to connect to the theme that we announced for this week's one, but I'll try and hold that in. So one of the sort of like qualities in I think one of the cultures we try and embrace in the shed is what we would call neuroqueer culture, which is simultaneously working against neuronormativity, the idea that a brain body is going to be working in any particular way, but also then like heteronormativity as well, that relationships between human beings fit into sort of black and white binary categories or those things. And when we try and understand how actually, as much as you try and raise your consciousness to what's happening, every single human being's got these internal biases, heuristics that are built into operating systems that are running. But that doesn't mean that we can escape the accountability of that. But then in saying, well, actually, I'm going to hold myself to account with these values.
Yes.
Is it that there is a right thing that you should have done? And as Mimi kind of introduced for today, the language evolves, and intergenerationally, there are no neat ways to divide it up, but actually generations above and below probably have different views on different words, and they're going to mean different things for them. So how do we understand the best way to do? So maybe it's, again, best, right. That's implying that same binary thinking I like
that best.
There is a way.
Best. You coming on that element of the best language. So it's not the right language.
Yeah.
You're talking about individuals with their own biases. That is universal. All of us, we are part of it. So we already have these ways of seeing, understanding, hearing, affected by maybe our journey and our experience, what we've learned before, what is our previous identity, what we acquired. But what we're saying here is, how do we progress? You mentioned it about saying the language is evolving. I like that. So you give an opportunity for everyone to say, what used to be my thinking, or what I used to use as a language, it has evolved. And what is the best language? So my question, I think, will be, is the best to you or the best to the person you are addressing? Mimi.
I think that's so incredibly subjective. I think generally, so I suppose like a little bit of context about me is, obviously I'm queer, I'm trans, I'm neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, potentially dyslexic, but we haven't delved into that hole yet. And I'm physically disabled as well. And because I've grown up as someone that is queer and trans and autistic, the way that I talk about myself is like the opposite of person first. What is the word I'm looking for here?
Identity first.
Identity first. There we go. I know myself so well. So I am a queer person versus a person with queerness, I suppose.
Right. Right.
And so that's based on being autistic and looking at the way that autistic people talk about themselves. I am an autistic person because autism is such a large part of my brain, and the way that that's helped me form relationships and understanding of the world. And it is such an integral part of myself. I can't separate myself from being autistic. It's not, I think the metaphor that people tend to use is, it's not like a handbag that I can put down. I am always autistic. It's not a detachable part. And the thing that I find really interesting about this is the fact that that is how a lot of like the autistic community uses the language. It's obviously how like queer and trans people describe themselves as they are queer. They're not a person with queerness. They're not a person with transness, because that just feels like a very strange thing to say. Whereas when it comes to disability, there's like a bit of a divide in that a lot of people will describe themselves as a person with a disability versus a disabled person. And so personally, I describe myself as a disabled person because it just makes the most sense to me. I can't separate myself from my disability. If I could not be disabled, I wouldn't be disabled. I wouldn't pass up on that opportunity, but it is a part of me and it forms a lot of the way that I do things. Whereas if I'm talking to someone who describes themselves as a person that is disabled or a person with a disability, then I would respect that and respect the way that they want to be talked about, be talked to. And I'd still maintain the way that I describe myself. I think you can do both at the same time. But it's that whole like understanding the respect part,
Yes.
in that some people might describe themselves, or some people might prefer to use language that is racist or ableist or sexist or whatever. And that's where like the respect bit is quite difficult to maintain, because respecting their language means disrespecting an entire group a lot of the time. And I think that's quite a tricky one to balance. And it's one of those ones that you know yourself and you know what you're comfortable with better than anyone. And if you're not comfortable with the way that someone's describing stuff, you don't have to condone that. You don't have to use that same language. I think
you touched on two main points. Really good. I'm just cautious of our listeners, because sometimes we can get on with this conversation when we're sitting, the three of us. The brain just keep going.
Yeah.
We have other people listening to us. And as I've put in the chat there, the Google Doc, if you have any, is it the mirror? Is it the?
Yeah,
can you tell people what it is?
We've got a Miro board where you can do post-its, and it was on the kind of that founding thing is you can ask us anything and we can answer with empathy. I think to just reinforce one of the things that Mimi said, respect was, I think, a really important word there in some of the language that we're trying to understand and make sense of. We talk about this, the three of us, pretty much every day. We bump into each other, we have these conversations, and now we're, thank you PTM Radio, having them live here. So it feels like we've moved from, we can't necessarily find the right language, but how do we work out what the best language is? I think where Mimi's taken us to on today's kind of journey and narrative is actually the power to make that decision actually sits with that individual. So they have the power to say, yeah, this is the best language for me. And a lot of the time, many challenges come from where people aren't given that power, and actually someone else is taking that agency from them, so they don't have the power to say, yeah, these are the words that best describe me. Wanted to, if it's all right with you, to share quite a specific example from an academic conference that I was at recently, which was the Neurodiversity in Higher Education conference in Bristol. And there were lots of identity first people kind of saying, yeah, I'm autistic, this is my experience, I'm ADHD. One category that kind of fits under that neurodivergent umbrella is like really quite a modern term, but it's just a difference in how humans develop language. But it's been labeled now, perhaps not by the people themselves, as developmental language disorder. And there was a real contrast by people at the conference. There were autistic people presenting about autistic experiences in higher education, but the developmental language disorder, which is, I think, statistics and numbers, has more people than are autistic. That presentation at the conference was by a researcher who they didn't have or identify with developmental language disorder. So the reason that I mentioned that story, which is a bit complicated, a bit confusing, it gets a bit technical, is that actually the group of people who use language differently, they haven't got the power and the agency to sort of accept or reject or create that label or an identity for themselves. So is it a label? Is it an identity? Developmental language disorder? We don't talk about that. No one knows about that, I don't think.
Already calling it a disorder.
Yeah.
It's out of order. and this is a interesting conversation. So you mentioned about their language of having and being.
Mm.
And you just touched on the subject as well, Stuart. So someone who is not in the circumstances, their way of thinking is going to be totally outside the box because they're not part of it. It's the same example I can give as well with us. We have people coming and developing modules, saying they're developing anti-racism modules to teach. They've never faced racism. They don't know what it is. They don't know that fear. They never lived with it. But they are the one developing it. So is that element of saying people want to, and it comes to that respect. So it's becoming as if it's a disorder, as you're mentioning, and someone want to fix it.
Yeah.
Are we asking things to be fixed? Am I asking, saying I want to be seen as not black? Because if you say you're fixing it, so I mean, you mean you are not agreeing with my race, or you're not valuing it?
I mean, so I think the example that kind of comes to mind for me in regards to that is a charity called Autism Speaks, which a lot of the autistic community know about, and then very few people outside of that community do. But they're this American charity who are like the biggest autism charity in the world, I think, or it's the most known one, particularly in the States. And they have, I'm fairly sure, no autistic people on their board. It's all neurotypical people who are making all these decisions about autistic people. They their logo is this puzzle piece, which became kind of like the symbol of autism for a really long time. And it was that whole like connoting the idea of being fixed or being like a missing piece, or there was just like a lot of ickiness is the best word that I can think of right now around it. And then on top of that, they wanted to cure autism. They wanted to fix it. And that very quickly kind of like developed into like eugenics and stuff like that, which obviously not great. That whole trying to figure out if a baby, like before they're born, if they're going to be autistic, and if they are, then obviously there's that whole, okay, now I know my child might be autistic, so I'm going to have an abortion, which is kind of like trying to like, I guess, breed autism out of the gene pool. And there's all this stuff which is just so gross, and that whole thing of fixing, and autistic people aren't broken. We don't need to be fixed. We think differently, and that is totally okay. And one of the other things that kind of comes alongside that is this.
Can I sorry for the stop. Can I ask you to repeat that? If you remember, I just say autistic people were not broken. Autistic people aren't broken. There is nothing to fix. And it's the same with like all of these marginalized groups. There is nothing to fix. There's all this stuff about like trying to cure blindness and to cure like deafness and stuff like that. And it's the whole like we're just existing. You don't need to find a cure for someone's life. I hope someone is listening to what you're saying there. It's very, very healthy and valuable, because there's so many those foul and belittling language, which is throw the respect away, and it's trying to bring this as if you have a disease, an illness, something to be fixed, as you said. And the society is driving forth with the saying that we're going to change the genetics and everything. It's coming close to that conversation what Hitler was having with the Nazis.
Yeah, I mean,
the pure race.
A little bit of history to interrupt you real quick. So Asperger's as a diagnosis is Asperger's and as autism. The reason that Asperger's has been taken out of the DSM-5, DSM-6, I don't know, whatever DSM we're on at the moment, is Hans Asperger was a Nazi, or at least he was affiliated with the Nazi party, and he was the reason that there was Asperger's and there was autism was Asperger's was the functional enough to be okay, and autism were the ones that weren't functional enough, and so were the people that were most likely to be killed. And that was like the beginning of not the beginning, but that was like a part of the eugenics that was involved in autism. And yeah, it's that kind of like functioning label thing as well, which is a really big thing with the autistic community, or at least people talking about autistic people, is high functioning versus low functioning. So me and Stu a lot of the time would be described as high functioning because we can come on the radio and we can do our work, and you're not going to see when we have a meltdown and it feels like it's the end of the world because we wore the wrong jumper or whatever. And then low functioning are the people that like can't talk, or that will only eat chicken nuggets or whatever, and that are not like functioning members of society. And that's such a gross way of describing people, and it's that whole like the putting people into boxes and the just deciding who is the good version and who is the bad version, and that binary thing again. And so it's the way that the autistic community have been kind of like trying to rejig this and kind of like word it in a better way is high support needs versus low support needs. And that is a fluctuating scale. Today, I'm fairly low support needs. I've managed to get to work by myself. I didn't manage to get on the bus because I missed my bus. That is an issue. But like, I've managed to not have a meltdown at the fact that I missed my bus. And I was just like, cool, I'm walking to work now. And all of that kind of stuff. So I'm very low support needs today. Like 3 days ago when I was trying to figure out how to get back from Belfast because I had no idea like what bus I was meant to take or whatever, and I was very close to like freaking out at that. That was a very high support needs day for me, and that was a day where my partner had to take care of me loads. And that doesn't make me any less of a functional person. It doesn't make me any less of a person, full stop. That's just who I am, and that should be okay.
Yeah, that should be okay.
That was my little soapbox rant for the day.
Thank you very much for that, Mimi. Again, this show is not just for the three of us here. What we're trying to do is sharing this knowledge, this experience, this lived experience with the society we live in, so that we go to that next stage where that word respect is very, very important. We bring in when we talk about the respect, when they value the other person, or you value the other person. I always say, I rather live in, it's not me who said it, but I'm quoting here Maya Angelou in her book. She mentioned, I rather live in a society where I am celebrated instead of being tolerated. Stuart, have you come across places where all these challenges of having a way of just being different in a way of thinking, people just feel like they have to tolerate instead of embracing and celebrating you or someone else you've come across in the neurodiverse spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the experience you described of it not being celebrated, and there's a joy in being so divergent in your thinking from how most other people are, but the real world, as people often like to call it, the whole of the real world does not celebrate so those differences. And one of those kind of stories of that I wanted to share on here as a note, because it came, I think, directly after the first episode, when someone who knows us really, really well said, "Oh, hey, Mimi and Stu, I know you both. You were masking the whole time on the show, and for those of you who don't know what masking is, it's a really, really typical, don't use this word lightly, normal human behavior. So actually pretty much every single human being is going to have times where they're going to change bits about themselves for the kind of the needs and the benefit of other people."
Customer service voice.
But where that becomes quite dangerous, and was interesting that someone spotted it in us on the radio show, was actually, if you're doing that the majority of the time to support other people's needs but not your own, that is over time going to be really, really harmful. So your question of, well, when do you experience those sort of lack of celebration of difference? Unfortunately, it is a lot of the time in a lot of the spaces. And what's really exciting about this radio show is, I think, some of that masking from episode 1 in a way, it's come more from, for me, the overwhelm of, I mean, I don't know what you can see on the cameras, but there's lights everywhere. There's loads of tech. I'm feeling the oldest I've ever felt, not being able to keep up with all the technology, which is quite a humbling experience. Rather than deep down trying to change what I'm saying here to do the right thing. Actually, what I'm trying to do here is the best for me, but also, like Mimi said, with the functioning labels and support needs. But actually, we are here, so we have a lot of power compared to some other people in the autistic community. So actually, how can we use this space to get the best for them and help their needs be met?
Well, I hope those listening are learning something or acquiring this new way of seeing things. It's every human being, and that's the part you're talking about, being selfless. But again, also you have to know how to celebrate yourself, because once you know how to celebrate yourself, you get that capacity of celebrating the others. And you do the too much of the masking, then it's not healthy, as you say. You become hypocritical. And I've seen it. So people sometimes they lose their own identity just to fit in, and those imposter syndromes. And it's on all those spectrum. And I think here that's what we're talking about. Being different, being in diversity. It's not that you have to conform to everything, wherever you are. I've seen places, well, I can give examples of individual from the Black community. This has been changing when you talk about language matters with the time. There are people who, because their name are difficult to be pronounced, that's the name given by their parents and have a meaning to them. But because they moved here, and some places you still have in the Chinese community here, university, and the person say, "Oh, just call me Joe." So you're just turning, saying, "Just call me." So you are conforming. Joe is not your name. Yeah. My name is I'm Jabo. Jabo means something to where I come from. It means something to my parents when they gave me that name. They knew why they were doing it. And this is every human being. If you look back and look at your name, your family gave you a name. There is a purpose. It did not just drop. You just don't wake up in the morning and say, "Okay, listen, I'm gonna be this name now." Or the parents just say, "We just pick one from the Google." They have a meaning behind it. It means something, and that's your identity. Because you're getting into this society where the majority are on this way of seeing things, and you see it differently, or you stand differently, you're trying to conform, but you lose your identity. That's not okay. Because as we're saying, language matters. Even the name is important. Make an effort to learn the person's name. So if my name is Chimaka and you don't know how to say it, the best way, ask me. Is this how you say your name? Yeah? It's simple, but you ask it with that respect, not asking to do a mockery. And define, I think it's the same with all. Whenever there comes diversity, you find someone. You tell us, Mimi, I say the terminology queer, and people are like, "Oh, can I call you queer? Can I say this?" Instead of you battling and deciding within your head, why don't you just use respect and curiosity and ask the other person, "How would you like? Or can you tell me more?" I think that's what we're trying to tell in everyone. It's evolving. It's diverse. It's exciting. And it's okay. But just open up. Yeah.
I think one of the things with it as well, though, I mean, in regards to names, obviously, like if someone doesn't know how to pronounce, then yeah, like you should ask. I think it's better to ask than it is to mess it up and ignore when you get corrected. But with like language, and I think this is something that I only really considered during the Black Lives Matter movement, and the fact that a lot of white people were relying on black people to educate them for free and doing all this like kind of emotional labor, and white people were like, cool, yeah, thanks, and all that, and not actually doing anything useful or beneficial to that person. If you are, like, for example, the queer person in the situation, and someone's asking you like, oh, why can I say queer now, or like just asking all of these questions in regards to like your personal power, you're allowed to say that you don't have the energy for it as well.
Yes.
I think it's that, like,
Yes.
that's kind of the point of this show, is for us to, we're in the position where we can use that kind of emotional labor, and we can answer these questions, we can explain, and obviously it's going to be from our personal experience, but we're still going to be able to do that. And we've got a very kind of like diverse representation in terms of like being a black person, being a disabled person, being queer, being trans, being autistic, being ADHD, being dyslexic and stuff like that. And we don't fit like every single experience out there, but we have quite a broad range of stuff. But just going up to a queer person on the street, or going up to a black person on the street and being like, why can I say that now, or can I say this, or what is the history of this thing, or whatever, and just expecting that knowledge, and like expecting them to explain everything, all because you want to have the answer. That there's the whole respect part, I suppose, is the whole, we are people. The people on the street are just normal guys just trying to live their life. They don't owe you an explanation for anything. We also don't owe you an explanation, but we want to be able to give you an explanation. We want to be able to do that. And yeah, just in terms of the personal power, you're allowed to say no.
The personal power. I like that. So again, it starts with yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
And knowing, saying, no, that's not right. Or it's not, I don't owe you anything. It's not because I'm different that I have to justify myself. And sometimes we'll get that conversation, I think, continuing on in our next episode, where it's that power dynamic, where, because I am body abled compared to the other person, and I feel I'm powerful because I can get on the bus without needing support, and I feel like I'm superior. That power dynamic. And I've seen so many times when someone is on the wheelchair and the person just come and push them.
I jumping in again. So obviously I was away last week, and so we had the wonderful Keith replacing me. But I was away in Belfast, and I was very determined to kind of use this as like the first holiday that I've actually looked after myself. And so I hired a wheelchair for the week. And it was fascinating in regards to the way that people treat you. And like my partner, for example, just doesn't understand, like, I guess, wheelchair etiquette yet, because it's the first time that I've been in a wheelchair. I don't think he's ever come across someone in a wheelchair that he's like had a proper conversation with. And yeah, so he was like pushing me around, and I had to explain to him that it's like when a toddler grabs onto your leg and you're trying to walk, and there's like the toddler's just clinging onto you. It's like that when someone starts pushing you randomly. Like, this is an extension of your body. It is your way of walking around, I suppose. And when someone's just like kind of clinging onto you, or leaning on the chair, or pushing you around, or whatever, it's so strange, and it feels like kind of an invasion of privacy. And obviously, like, I was fine with it. It was my partner. I'd like to think we have a nice relationship, and I wasn't particularly angry at that. But that, and then like, getting onto the bus, and there was someone who on the wheelchair section, there's like the 3 sideways seats, and then there's like the backrest thing. And this lady was sat on like the last sideways seat next to the like elderly / disabled space. Not the wheelchair space. I'm like picturing a bus in my head and not using the words very well to describe it. But yeah, and I had to like squeeze in to this tiny little spot that was only like 2 sideways chairs wide. And she just didn't do anything. And like, it was an empty bus as well. Like, she could have moved. And she just wasn't doing that. And it's that whole me asking her to move felt really rude, and like I shouldn't be doing that, and that I don't have the, I guess, authority to do that. But it's like, it's my space, and like I couldn't sit safely on that bus, and it was like technically like endangering myself, all for the comfort of this random lady who I was never going to meet again because I was in Belfast, and
Yeah.
it's going to be like another year or more till I see her. She's not going to remember me. And yeah, it's the whole, I think we, particularly as marginalized people, and it's something that I've talked about before, permission, I think is
Yes.
a really big thing.
Yes.
Is when you're constantly told no, or that you're wrong because of whatever thing that you just can't control, or that whatever you're doing is inappropriate purely because of the color of your skin or the way that you talk or the way that your brain
Yes.
works. You feel like you have to ask permission for everything. And I felt like I had to, it was asking permission for her to let me sit safely on a bus, which is not, like, logically, you know that that's not right, and that you didn't have to do that, and that it's totally possible just to be like, hey, can you shuffle to like just the other side of the aisle? That would be fine. And my partner ended up stepping in a couple of times and doing that for me, being like, mate, you need to move out the way. And he was able to get them to move so much easier than I could because I was seen as lesser. And this is just from a week of being in a chair, let alone my entire life or whatever. It was a very interesting, I guess, perspective into what a lot of people face all of the time.
Yeah.
That was a very long rant.
It's that power dynamic. Shall we capture that next week? Because I'm just conscious of the time. Can we explore this? Because it's not only the language, it's how you make the person feel. When we're talking about respect, it's the way you can use the tone without any respect, but you've used the language correctly. Language is not, when we say language matters here, we're not saying it's only the word you are using. It's the whole thing packaged together. So we'll explore that, but we don't want to leave it for just ourselves talking. Stu, you put in there the Myra. Do you want to talk about a little bit about it so you can tell people how they can get in touch even after the show, so that we can get those input?
Yeah. So how the board works is you can click the link, which is at bit.ly.
I'm putting it on the screen. It's on now.
Totally not going to show up nicely.
/ask-752, but the link is in the comments for all the live streams. I think nice one, everyone getting that in the comments. We'll make sure to share it a few times during the week, this week on social media. But you click the link and there's some yellow post-it notes on there, so you can type questions in and keep them short, but it is completely anonymous, so no one can see who's written what. So there's bit of a warning. There might be things on there that might be quite harmful to you, but actually we want it to be a radically open space. So if you did want to write something that is controversial, we can have it on there, and then the answer that we give is hopefully going to have some empathy, because we're not saying, well, our response is the right response. It's actually how can we work out the best response for the person asking that question and the genuine need for information or understanding or sharing that they have. So we can use that board. Again, if you contact us through other channels, social medias, direct messages, you don't need that anonymous posting, then we can happily add those questions to post-it notes with or without your name. Just direct message us on any of those channels and we can get those questions on there.
Thank you so much for that information, Stu. Again, just recapping, this is a conversation we're going to be having every Tuesday. We're going to be here from 12:30 to 1:30. So we just bang on time. We're 1 minute before the end of our session. We're talking about language matters in this spectrum of diversity, where I think the right word is we celebrate the differences instead of just being tolerated. So see you again next week, where we'll continue this conversation. We'll pick on two topics. We talk about the power dynamic, and we picked about permission. Are you feeling like you're asking for permission, or you're just being pushed? Or do you feel like someone have to hold your hand for you to go on the other side? That's what the society is giving. So we'll talk about this. You want to reach out? Text us. And as Stuart mentioned, our social media, they're available. Until then, guys, we're going to be seeing each other next week. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but have you got any wise word you want to share, some wisdom with for the next 30 seconds we have left?
Yeah, I'm happy to suggest one thing that was on my mind from today's conversations, which is permission comes close to consent. What is often hard is that feeling of needing to get permission is actually not being able to consent to that other person kind of using their power in a way over you. And that could be, it's sometimes subtle and they don't realize it themselves, but what it is actually they don't believe your lived experience, and that's hard. So if someone's telling you a story and the whole of you is saying, well, actually I just don't believe what they're saying, that's for you to explore. Why don't you believe them? Not about that person's lived experience who you're listening to.
Wow. I think we haven't got anything else to add on that one. Until next week, thank you so much for your time, and we shall see each other next week. Take care, and thank you, P-Town.